The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is in Kenya for the second time after the first time, which was in 1976, 40 years ago. So we're here with Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma, the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who seems very excited because this conference is here. Madam Secretary, welcome.
Thank you, Wallace.
Why are we supposed to be excited about UNCTAD being here, except for the fact that UNCTAD is led by Kenya?
We are supposed to be excited, Wallace, because we are probably the only country on this continent that is hosting UNCTAD for a second time since it was created in 1964. But more importantly, we are having UNCTAD as the first major conference after a series of significant decisions in 2015. Significant decision in terms of the SDGs, significant decisions in terms of the Addis Ababa Declaration, significant decisions in terms of COP21, which have committed the world to a transformative agenda. So this is the first time that we are beginning to give traction to those decisions, and that is why the theme of UNCTAD 14 is from decisions to action.
And that is a crux of the matter, because except for the Paris discussions, what you're calling COP21 about climate change, I don't seem to have any other memory of one of these big multilateral conferences that's successful. It's usually a talk shop. Everyone says we will kick the can down the road, as the Americans say, so make major decisions because they're too difficult politically.
They are very important in terms of setting the norms and setting the standards. And we are also very excited, I have to say, Wallace, that the negotiations of the SDGs was co-chaired by a Kenyan ambassador, putting us again in the world stage as a global leader in terms of negotiating the parameters that is going to make development more inclusive and to bring prosperity to a larger proportion of the world population. So it's not just a talk show, it's about standard setting, it's about trying to generate a vision that would guide the development parameters and development plans of the countries across the world.
But let's be strict here. What do we get out of it as a country? Because apart from the hotels and probably the taxi companies that make a lot of money, what you see is traffic disruption. They don't seem to touch what you might call one genuine person on the streets. What is it that we get as a country out of these conferences, except for revenue from accommodation?
Well, I think that is a very misguided notion. Let me just give you an example of one of the signature events, namely the Commodities Forum. In the Commodities Forum, which ended yesterday, the big discussion there was about how do you begin to create value addition in a serious way. And when you talk about adding value to the primary commodities, for Kenya, you're talking about tea, you're talking about coffee, you're talking about cotton, you're talking about sugar, things that all Wanjikos are growing.
The point is not so much about the meeting itself, it's about where the meeting is held. So
yes,
that discussion being held in Nairobi, if it had been held in Durban, if it had been held in Phnom Penh, if it had been held in New York, the same issues still have been discussed. So what's the value of Kenya hosting that?
Well, but one of the things is that it is bringing across, I've just seen a clip here that you brought some of the world CEOs. We are having great discussion. We are having representatives from the counties, governors, representatives, business people, young people that are doing innovative things. And there's a lot of work that is happening beyond the intergovernmental negotiation. Actually, quite a number of deals being cut, in terms of concluding deals. And so it is not just about governmental people talking. In fact, the range of stakeholders that have come to UNCTAD is what makes it quite unique. We do not have forums where people are talking by themselves. We are having forums that integrate all these voices together. We are having youth representatives in the intergovernmental meetings. They are debating with presidents. They are debating with United Nations agencies, as you have just seen in that clip. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas, but more importantly, also discussions around how to transform those ideas into real returns in terms of...
One final one about UNCTAD. How do all these conferences sequence or link with each other? So we had the World Trade Organization here in December, we have UNCTAD now, we have TICAD coming at the end of August.
Yes.
Is there any build-up from one to the other in as much as they're unrelated conferences?
Of course, they are not unrelated. The general objective of these conferences is really to grow the portfolio that is going to help us translate our aspirations for prosperity into reality. You know, here we are having people that have never been to Africa before. They are looking at Kenya, looking at the way it is the gateway into the Eastern Central African region, because we have also as a country determined that we cannot translate our aspirations, we cannot translate our opportunities on our own, and therefore the region is also important. So discussions are not just taking place about Kenya, they are taking place about the region, they are taking place about Africa, they are taking place about South, the global South. So it's big and very in-depth discussions that are meaningful, not just to ourselves, but to the entire world.
And you know what, now that you're sitting here, there's another story I want to bring to the fore, and I'll ask you about it. Because a vote for the new chairperson of the African Union was suspended after all candidates failed to get the required two-thirds majority of votes. The successor to South African incumbent Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was expected to be elected at the AU summit, which was taking place in Kigali at the weekend and into today. But it seems that the leaders present could not agree on who among the candidates will lead the union. The leaders were choosing between former Ugandan Vice President Specioza Wandira Kazibwe, Pelonomi Venson Moitoi from Botswana, and Agapito Mba Mokwe from Equatorial Guinea. It's not clear who Kenya was backing, although it would be surprising if the country was to have supported a candidate from outside the East African region. A proposal from the West African grouping ECOWAS calling for a postponement of the election to January 2017 had been voted down yesterday. The suspension means that the vote may now be held in January, and it's expected that former Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete could put forward his candidature. Now, that story says that Kenya was, it was unclear, at least to me who wrote that story, who Kenya's candidate was. Monica Juma, Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs, is smiling. She's a diplomat. She probably won't tell me, but I'll ask her anyway. Who was our candidate?
Wallace. First of all, the idea that an election doesn't provide an overall winner is not new. Certainly not in the African Union context. This has happened before several times. But the idea is that the head of the Commission of the African Union must have across the continent support. Yes. And therefore it's a very high threshold. It's a two-thirds threshold. And this is what the three candidates did not get. So it's not unusual.
38 votes.
Yes, it is, out of 54.
And just to put you into the picture, you're supposed to get 38 votes out of the 54. I think the top candidate had 14. It implies to me that not enough work was done lobbying the member states of the African Union on behalf of the candidates.
Well, by the time they went into the last round, she actually had 27 votes.
This is Dr. Kazibwe?
The Botswana foreign minister.
Okay.
But this is not unusual again. I mean, of course, an election of the commission is continent-wide, and this is a large continent. And so it is not unusual, and we are going to go back to the drawing board because we must get commissioners in office by the next January. But just to indicate to Kenyans that there is no vacancy. You know, the commissioners are in place, work is going to be going on, and we are going to go to another round of electioneering.
So here's a question. We have rubbed the blackboard clean. What's the chance that we put forward a candidate from the Republic of Kenya?
Well, it is possible. We are among the 54 member states, and you can put up a candidate. There's no problem with that.
Dr. Juma is speaking like a true diplomat.
No,
how are we going to put together?
No,
how are we going to put forward a candidate?
Well, we just listen. We just came out of Kigali. We are having UNCTAD now. We have a lot in our hands right now, so we haven't quite discussed that. And when it comes up, we shall take it up. Something
else that's been a problem for the 54 members of the African Union is a 54th member, South Sudan. There has been a resurgence of violence. There was violence in 2013 which killed quite a number of people, tens of thousands of people. There are numbers up to 1 million displaced. It seems to have come back. There are multiple things about that, but I want to ask the most urgent ones. First, Kenya does have some leverage over the leaders of South Sudan. That's Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar. What are we doing to put that leverage to bear so that this conflict doesn't arise again and innocent people suffer?
Our engagement with South Sudan, Wallace, is not new. You will know that we were one of the people that guaranteed the CPA in 2005. We have been engaged in South Sudan through its young history, from the time of the referendum to the secession and to the new country. When the violence erupted in 2013, our president was in there within hours of that violence. And he has never ceased to remain engaged with South Sudan. In fact, it was his leverage that persuaded them into signing the peace agreement, as you probably know. And he never even stopped. We have held a number of JMAC meetings in this country. We have been in constant communication with both sides of that conflict. And when this conflict erupted on the 7th, it was most unfortunate. And the president re-engaged again very intensely. You will know that we were having a guest in town when we were also holding an IGAD ministerial session. Our chiefs of defense staff were engaged. They have been engaged. We sent somebody on the ground to do an assessment. So we've been engaged, and I think it was that engagement that delivered the ceasefire. Calm has returned to Juba. It is an uneasy calm. We have engaged with the UN Security Council. The president just returned the other night from Kigali, actually on yesterday, and they had a session that lasted up to close to midnight. But so very intense engagement, I have to say, Wallace.
Accepted that we've done the input of the effort. The output is what sometimes gets worrisome. We've tried the carrots. Are we prepared to pull out the sticks? Thinking here that South Sudan, especially the leaders, have a lot of investment here. The families are present in Kenya. This is where they go to school. This is where they have leisure. This is where they have the investments. Are we going to use that to bring peace to the country?
There are a number of resolutions, including UN Security Council resolutions, that have proffered a number of measures. But just to indicate here that the problem of South Sudan cannot be solved by just one country. And that is why we have worked together with the region and with the UN Security Council. And you probably have heard the president's statement in the last few days, greatly disappointed because a lot of work has gone into this peace agreement, and any measures that are going to bring back stability in South Sudan will be undertaken.
One final one about South Sudan, actually one final question overall. The repatriation of Kenyans who want to come back from Juba and other places in South Sudan back to the safety of Kenya. How is that going? Some people say there was a delay. It took a long time for them to start being evacuated. There may not be enough flights. How is that process going?
Not at all. It never took a long time, Wallace. Since this crisis began, we were in touch. We were doing an assessment. And when we commenced the repatriation on Saturday, it has been ongoing. Today, we flew into 2 flights. We have removed about 700 Kenyans, probably upwards of 700. We'll be having a flight going in tomorrow. But this is an emergency operation, which we are going to call off because the number of people that have been assessed as vulnerable has reduced quite significantly. We've not had any death. We have been lucky to actually fly people in without any incidences, even in the air, except for one person that came in with a bullet wound and another that arrived yesterday who was not well. But that operation has been very smooth and very successful. I have been overseeing it since Saturday.
Was there any expense to the evacuees?
Not at all. Not at all.
So this was all on government?
It was all on government. It was on the exchequer. We got them in. We had a medical team flown to Juba that was looking at them. We had the Red Cross with us receiving them, and they were examined. They were given a little food and a little money to get them home.
All right, thank you very much. There's a lot to discuss, but unfortunately, we'll have to call you back to get who the Kenyan candidate.
Thank you, Wallace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have been speaking
Always a
to
pleasure.
Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma, the Principal Secretary, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. A lot of stuff that's on her plate right now. UNCTAD is in town all the way until the weekend. The AU chair is something we have to think about, and obviously the South Sudan crisis.